Hi, I'm Meg Meredith, Grants Manager at PEDIGREE Foundation. We're so excited to kick off this year's Best Practice webinar series with a Dogs Rule grant recipient. San Diego Humane Society is joining us today to present their Welcome Committee programming. There's so much to share, so let me turn it over to Amanda Kowalski, Vice President of Animal Welfare, for introductions and their presentation. Amanda?
Hi, thank you so much, Meg, and welcome to everybody who's joining us for this presentation. So before I get started, I want to go ahead and introduce my colleagues that are with me and who have played a very important role in helping us build out this program over the years and build out educational pieces as well for the program. So, as Meg said, my name is Amanda Kowalski. I'll give you a little bit of a background of myself. I've had the pleasure of working for a few different organizations throughout my career. However, San Diego Humane Society has been my longest time by far. I have specialized in behavioral care in shelters for more than 15 years before taking this role as Vice President of Animal Welfare. 7 of those years, I've led the San Diego Humane Society's Behavior and Training Program and Behavior Center facility, which has helped we're almost at 6,000 shelter animals through that program itself. I have a master's degree in science and animals and public policy from the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts, along with multiple certificates, one being in applied animal behavior from the University of Washington. I am a certified animal welfare administrator through the Association of Animal Welfare Advancement and a fear-free certified professional trainer and a certified professional dog trainer as well. So again, I'm joined today by 2 of my talented colleagues. I'll start with Shannon Feeney, who has spent over 13 years working and volunteering in animal welfare for numerous nonprofit organizations across the country and has been focusing in on behavior and training. Shannon is a certified shelter behavior specialist. So she is certified in shelter behavior consulting for both dogs and cats. She's a certified professional dog trainer and a licensed family paws parent educator. Shannon has worked for San Diego Humane Society for over 9 years. I've had the pleasure of working with her for the majority of that, I think, at this point. And currently, she is our behavior and training manager for our North campuses. And then we have Fernando Diaz, who is our Behavior Center Academy Manager for San Diego Humane Society. He has over 15 years of experience in animal care industry, having worked with marine mammals, reptiles, fish, cats, and of course, dogs. He oversees the development and administration of our Behavior Center Academy program and Shadow program and Shelter Outreach program. Fernando has served as board member at large for the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, and most recently as the president of the board of directors for the Shelter Playgroup Alliance. So he's also a certified dog behavior consultant and certified shelter behavior specialist and certified professional dog trainers. All right, so we will begin today with a brief introduction to San Diego Humane Society and who we are so that we can set the stage for what has inspired us to develop and implement this program and hopefully provide some inspiration. And we'll talk about the tools that we have to help you and your organizations implement a similar program as well. So we'll talk about the creation of the Welcoming Committee program, operation protocols and considerations for your organization. The Welcome Committee in action will give you some examples of the program and how it's worked within our organization. And then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions in chat throughout this presentation. Fernando and Shannon will be helping me managing the chat by typing in responses directly to you. Later on, at the end, we'll leave some time for additional questions, or feel free to reach out to the email that's on the slide at behaviorcenteracademy@sdhumane.org. And we're happy to answer any additional questions or set up a call later on too, if you want to talk more about the program. And then lastly, a copy of today's webinar will be available on the Pedigree Foundation website at that URL, pedigreefoundation.org/shelters-grant. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so who we are as an organization. So San Diego Humane Society is a high volume open admission shelter. We have multiple campuses, actually 5, across San Diego County, and we provide animal services in 13 cities across the county. We have over 650 staff members now. We're getting close to that 700 mark, and more than 2/3 of our staff are operations focused. So they're working hands-on with animals in care, or working with community members and working with them to provide them with the resources to try to keep their animals out of the shelter. We have over 3,000 active volunteers, including our foster base. Every year, we're taking in about 40,000 animals, and we have a variety of different programming from volunteer to foster, behavior, medical, and then our community-based programming to offer resources to keep pets with their people. Our kitten nursery program has helped more than 13,000 kittens since its inception in 2009, and we have an HLE, our humane law enforcement team, who is out in our community every day and responds to thousands of reports from the community and addressing animal cruelty every year. And then our medical program also offers community veterinary support through their hospital program, through the spay-neuter program, and vaccine clinics. And then finally, our behavior and training program. This is a program that obviously is is dear to all of us. It's been a well-established program for over 2 decades. And we have teams across all of our campuses. Though in 2013, we advanced our model to incorporate even more behavior modification for animals in our care. And in 2019, we opened one of only a few in the country behavior center facilities so that we continue doing that work. That facility can house about 75 animals, majority of them dogs. And since we've opened that facility, we've helped about 6,000 animals through that program. So we're not only caring for more than 40,000 animals in our communities annually, but one thing that I so much value about being able to do with San Diego Humane Societies is share our expertise and the lessons learned from our program implementation. I'm the queen of pilots at our organization. I love them. That is how we advance. That is how we innovate. And I love being able to share what we have learned through those pilots and through those programs with shelters and organizations like yours, and because that is how we work together to save more animals in our communities. So what inspired us? So I'm going to share a little bit of a story on kind of what was the inspiration for the Welcome Committee program. So in 2018, as we took on several city contracts, we were starting to see an increase in the volume of dogs in our care. That was the set in the beginning of just kind of overwhelming and inundating our behavior and training team with behavior assessment requests to help support these dogs as they were coming in. So on any given day, our behavior team across all of our campuses could have 30 to 50 to even more dogs who were being tagged as needing a behavior assessment. And so again, that was such an overwhelming feeling. And we had to really think about how we were going to address one, that volume of animals coming through, or dogs coming through the shelter, having this request associated with them, so that we could work on providing some relief to our behavior team, but also relief to the animals as well. And so the other thing that we needed to really address, because this was causing a bottleneck situation, it was extending our length of stay. So dogs who were coming in that may be on stray holds, where we're holding them for 72 hours, right? That is what is required for us. Um, they weren't then being worked with and or seen, or information wasn't being collected as they were coming into the shelter. And so we needed to think through how we were going to try to capture that information sooner rather than later, even if it was just a few days later. As we know, extended length of stay could really impact the physical and behavioral well-being of the animals in our care. And then again, addressing the fear-related behaviors that we were experiencing with these animals, and really having the ability to triage so that our behavior team could focus on ones that had specific specialized needs. So light bulb moment, we thought, what if we could all work together to start impacting behavior change as soon as animals, or as soon as the dogs entered our shelter? And something that at San Diego Humane Society, we are very committed to setting the gold standard in meeting the needs for animals and the people who love them. And so, we call this unique approach the SDHS way. It is our commitment to our community to provide exemplary animal care and a guest experience. It's rooted in compassion, exceeding expectations, and personalized care. And so, with that approach, this was an opportunity for us to make a commitment to creative problem solving so that we can transform these challenges that we are experiencing um, into ways to transform the lives of these animals, of our staff, build connections, work across departments with each other, and create and foster more teamwork, and be there for our community in different ways. So what is the Welcome Committee program? It is a shelter operations initiative that is dedicated to improving the welfare of shelter dogs. While it's supported by the behavior and training team through training and resources, this program has been designed to be spearheaded by our shelter's admissions and animal care teams. We also have trained volunteers and staff members who focus on implementing environmental management strategies, enrichment, communication, and documentation, and behavior intervention to support the dogs that are incoming who are experiencing fear, anxiety, and stress. The primary goal of the Welcome Committee program is to facilitate a swift and smooth transition for newly admitted dogs, helping them to acclimate to their new surroundings with less discomfort. And as we start to learn more about them, we are able then to make them available for adoption and also foster and opportunities to get out of the shelter as quickly as possible. So one note, I did mention, our behavior assessment process when we started implementing this program and piloting it in 2018 was very different. And over the years, we have developed a continuous behavior assessment. So we are not doing kind of the battery style behavior assessments. We have evolved our process to uh, gather information continuously as an animal enters care. And that is sometimes from the moment that we may have a call with somebody in our community, and they may be thinking about relinquishment. We are gathering information, about their animal. We're providing them with resources, but we're also collecting that information. So if that animal does come to our shelter or any of our campuses, we have already started information gathering and getting detailed information about what they like, what they don't like, what they're afraid of, their experiences. And so it's really important for us to be able to collect all of this information. It helps us create a more holistic behavioral profile for the animals. And it's not just focusing on one single source of information, but many sources of information. And it just doesn't stop if one of our trainers or our animal caregivers works with the animal. It is ongoing as they are with us for their entire stay. And this concept of a continuous behavior assessment process and our process that we have really elevates this idea of everyone is on the behavior team. So we have very much believe in that everyone, no matter the department, you do not have to be in the behavior and training department to be on the behavior team. Every interaction with an animal is an opportunity to provide them with positive experiences to support their care, reduce fear, anxiety, and stress, and even prevent illness. And when our staff and volunteers across the organization, when we're working towards this goal, we are not only meeting their physical and behavioral needs, but it benefits everyone. We're communicating better with each other. And so for these reasons, we truly believe that everyone is on the behavior team. And this, again, is a foundation and a foundational approach to what we wanted to create with the Welcome Committee program. So I'm going to pass this off to Shannon to walk us through specifics of the operation protocols, responsibilities from the different teams. And, one thing that I do, I hope that what we are able to share with you today provides you with some inspiration. And, we recognize that every shelter, every organization is going to be different. And so we've built this program as a way to be flexible based on what your needs are. Take it away, Shannon.
Thanks, Amanda. And hi, everyone. So I'm going to walk y'all through in the next few slides here, sort of the developmental process, how we sort of created and have since honed our operations protocol. So we're going to look at candidate criteria, how to identify the dogs that you want to enroll into what a Welcome Committee program could look like in your facility or your shelter. And then some of the processes in terms of indications in databases, in kennel areas, and stuff like that. So in the process of developing our operations protocol, that first question, once we had that inspiration, that story, and that vision that Amanda was talking about, that first step in developing that operation protocol for us was thinking about kind of the who in that. Who are the dogs that we want to see supported by our Welcome Committee program? So for us, and again, this could look different for you, but for us, we decided that the two qualifiers that we were going to use to help our admissions team identify on intake, so at that point of intake, as that dog is being admitted to the shelter, whether or not they qualify for the Welcome Committee program, were their behavior. So FAS scores, fear, anxiety, and stress. That scale, those scores that's brought to us by fear-free shelters. That 0 through 5 document is what I'm talking about. And those FAS scores that are included in that, that's what we're talking about here, and that's what we're using as a qualifier. So certain FAS scores. And then our second qualifier was going to be our intake source. So where that animal is coming from and sort of what the circumstances are of their admission to the shelter. And in thinking about that sort of like resource allocation and efficiency perspective that Amanda was talking about, we're really looking at statuses where those animals, just given the circumstances of them entering the shelter, are likely to be held in a status for a certain period of days anyways. And we're seeing at the point of intake that they're struggling with fear, and that's likely something that might continue once we house them. They're actually living in our facilities. So let's just get them that support that they need right away. So this flowchart that you're looking at on this screen here is a flowchart that our admissions team can use as a tool to determine, again, given FAS scores and source, which dogs are going to be candidates for the Welcome Committee program. So this is available in our operations protocol. We're going to talk to you later about where you can find that. We're gonna share that with y'all. But generally speaking, and looking at some of these qualifiers, and thinking about FAS, the dogs that are going to qualify for enrollment into the Welcome Committee program are going to be dogs that have an FAS score of 0 1, 2, or 3. So that's 0 through 3. And again, that's just what we decided on. That's what we decided is going to work for us in our Welcome Committee program. And then those intake sources, we're looking at sources where, again, those animals are going to be held for some period of time given the circumstances of their admission to the shelter in our facilities anyway. So the sources we're looking at for as our second qualifier for Welcome Committee, the Welcome Committee program, are strays. So that would be a stray that's going to serve a stray hold period, or a stray that's coming in with some identifying information of a possible owner, and they're going to move into an ID trace status, which is also a holding status. Emergency boarding. So that is a source and a status that we use in our facilities. That means that for the cities that we're providing services to, there is an owner of an animal that was either hospitalized or arrested. So we are emergency boarding those animals at our facility for a period of time. And then owner surrender. We also decided we wanted to include owner surrenders. What's a little bit different about the owner surrender source for a dog that might be a candidate for Welcome Committee is we decided that for those lower FAS scores for owner surrenders, where that animal's becoming our property right away, and we could, if they're altered, same day, make them available for adoption and get them moving out of the shelter quickly, right, ideally. So for owner surrenders, we decided that for those lower FAS scores, 0 through 2, since those dogs aren't going to be held in a status anyways, and they're becoming our property right away, we're really looking at an FAS score of 3 for owner surrenders in order for us to work with them and enroll them into the Welcome Committee. It's not that animals with those lower scores that are made available aren't going to receive some type of support at our facilities. They will, but they won't be enrolled into the Welcome Committee or held back from an available for adoption status. So those owner surrenders with an FAS score of 3, we're also placing in an awaiting behavioral assessment status. So that is flagging our behavior team to triage, right? We have a high volume of animals coming through our shelter. We're really busy. Triage and get to those animals as quickly as possible. And sometimes that does mean a day or two before we're able to see those animals. So by enrolling them into the Welcome Committee as well, we're able to, again, get them that support that they need to help them cope with the fear that they're experiencing right away by teams that are already in those areas, already working with them, cleaning their kennels, spending time in their areas anyways. And then we'll talk more about this later, but we're also going to look at signage and indications in our database. So statuses and tags that we use to indicate both to our staff and volunteers that an animal is a part of Welcome Committee. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking a little bit closer at those roles, and again, you're going to get a copy, and we'll share how you can access a copy of our operations protocol so you can get your hands on this stuff. But looking closer about the roles and responsibilities of the folks involved. Again, as Amanda shared at San Diego Humane Society, we believe, and we believe that everyone's on the behavior team. So everybody really plays a part and can play a part in the support of all animals in our facilities, and maybe especially those enrolled in the Welcome Committee. But really our 4 core groups or teams that are going to be implementing this operations protocol for Welcome Committee are going to be your admissions team, so the folks that are receiving animals at intake, leadership teams, so folks that maybe can review records and ensure everything is going smoothly, looks appropriate, and that we're enrolling the appropriate animals into the Welcome Committee program. Animal care teams, right, heavily involved in the daily care of animals. So working with those animals anyway, spending time with them anyway. So those folks are going to participate in looking at housing and implementing certain aspects of Welcome Committee. And then our Welcome Committee participants, when you hear me or us say that word, what we're talking about is folks that are participating in Welcome Committee type work, and they have gone through the Welcome Committee educational component. So we do have an educational component, an online program that we'll talk more to you about a little bit today, and then in a couple weeks at our second webinar. But these are your 4 core teams. So they're going to play slightly different roles, all working together, right, collaboratively to implement this operations protocol for Welcome Committee. Your admissions teams, they are assessing the behavior of incoming animals, looking at those 2 qualifiers of behavior, so FAS score and source, to identify animals that are candidates for Welcome Committee, and then tagging and tracking. So they are tagging and tracking those animals through those indications that we're using in our shelter database. So we use Shelter Buddy, and then in kennel areas as well. So at kennel front and in any sort of kennel whiteboards, living in kennel areas for communication. Leadership is responsible for, of course, reviewing and ensuring that all the appropriate steps are taken. Those tagging and tracking pieces of this program are really important, not just to identify animals that are part of Welcome Committee and alert folks to that, but also we'll talk more about how we use those aspects of our program to track the success of the program as well. So leadership is going to be ensuring that all those steps are taken in our database and at Kennel Front to indicate that animals are part of Welcome Committee. Review those notes, make sure that they're really a candidate and they're meeting our candidate criteria given their behavior and their source. And then sometimes this doesn't happen often, but it does come up. Sometimes after we house an animal in a kennel, sometimes their behavior will change and sometimes their behavior will escalate. So what we've decided is that for those higher FAS scores, so those scores of 4 or 5, where we're seeing those sort of fight, flight, freeze type behaviors, so a little bit of aggression maybe, or just overall really shut down or more significant behavior. We've decided that those animals aren't going to be a part of our Welcome Committee, and instead for those animals, we're going to alert our behavior team right away and get them that specialized support as soon as possible. So if that happens after an animal's flagged as part of Welcome Committee and tagging and tracking is happening, and then they enter a facility, they're kenneled, and then their behavior escalates, we might remove those indications, and that would be the responsibility of leadership to review those notes and view those animals in their kennel to make sure that that's appropriate for them. Animal care, they're going to be implementing daily care, right, for all of our animals. So animal care is heavily involved in some of the housing aspects that we'll get. Fernando is going to take us a little deeper on a little bit later, but implementing enriched housing. So looking at what that animal's kennel looks like, where it is, what the environment inside of their kennel is like, and then additional enrichment as well as an aspect of the Welcome Committee. So getting animals that are on the Welcome Committee or in the Welcome Committee program, additional enrichment in their kennel and out of their kennel as well. And then, of course, sharing information. Anyone really, of course, who is participating in, supporting Welcome Committee dogs through the program is responsible for sharing information via our record keeping system. So objective note taking is an aspect of that as well. And sometimes especially so for animal care folks who are really, again, spending a lot of time in those kennel areas with dogs. And then for our Welcome Committee participants as well. So again, those Welcome Committee participants are the folks that have completed our educational program. That educational program, we'll get more into that next webinar and later, but that's going to set folks up to actually implement behavior plans. So training plans or behavior plans, those terms are synonymous, but actually implementing behavior modification type work with Welcome Committee animals. And that's really where those folks that have graduated from the educational program, those Welcome Committee participants come in and support Welcome Committee animals, in addition to, again, sharing information via objective note taking. Next slide, please. Okay. So what's going to work for your organization? Again, as Amanda mentioned, we want this process and we see this process as adaptable. Your organization is not the same as ours. So you're going to have to use this right as like inspiration, the concept, the vision, the idea, and how we're doing it to adapt something that's going to work for your shelter with, keeping in mind that the goal here, the mission, and sort of the heart of Welcome Committee is supporting fearful animals while they're in the shelter. So adapting the process, and thinking about some of the different versions of our operations protocol that we've lived at San Diego Humane Society. We have some, I think, sage advice to share with you in terms of developing a protocol in your facility. In terms of adapting the process, where you're going to want to start is, of course, with that who are the animals that you want to support, but also with looking at your systems of communication. So how are you already communicating about the behavior of animals that are in your facilities? How are you using signage? How are you using your database? All sorts of things like that, whiteboards, any systems of communication, consider those, take a look at those, and let those inspire you to use probably systems that are already in place for identifying Welcome Committee dogs or candidates. And collaborate. Collaboration has been a huge part of this process. With Welcome Committee, we're moving through another version of sort of honing and developing our operations protocol again. As things change in our shelter, we revisit that, regroup, and get back together with all the folks involved. So when I say all the folks, I'm thinking about this sort of like 4 core folks involved in the implementation of this program. And I'm really thinking about animal services here. Animal services heavily involved in spearheading this. So getting those folks involved in creating and developing an operations protocol. And then when you are adapting that again or adjusting that as needed as things change in your facility, getting those folks involved again so that they're invested in the success of that and really have a deep understanding of how the protocol works and its purpose. And then once that's all on the ground, once you have a welcome committee program in place in your facility, reinforce that behavior. So reinforce the behavior of the people that you see getting really involved and really participating and playing a really active role in supporting animals that are enrolled into the welcome committee. So to give you an idea of how we've sort of spotlighted some of these individuals at our organization, we've shared information about them, stories, photos, things like that in newsletters, in board reports. And for the folks that are actually graduating from the educational component of the Welcome Committee program, we offer those folks a pin that's a behavior champion pin that they can actually wear as a part of their uniform. So again, it's adaptable. Think about your organization, examine systems of communication, what already works for you, what you're already using, your shelter database, collaborate, get folks involved that are going to be really involved in this process so that they're invested and have a really deep understanding of how this program works. And then once it's on the ground, find a way to sort of spotlight the individuals that are really just shining and participating in welcome committee type work. Next slide, please. Okay. So this cute dog that we're looking at here on the screen is Elkie, and Elkie is a welcome committee case. So she was a dog that was out in our facilities some time ago, and she was enrolled into the welcome committee program. And hopefully these photos of what her signage looked like, what her housing looked like, and then some of the indications in her record that she was a part of the welcome committee program can start to really give you an idea of what this can look like at kennel front, in kennel areas, and in a shelter database. So Elkie here was a stray animal. So she was an animal that was already going to be in that holding status, right, for 72 hours until she became our property, and we could even, make her available for adoption. So again, already in that holding status, might as well purpose that time, right, to help her start to cope better with the shelter environment, because she was a dog that, given her source and behavior at the time of intake, we determined was a candidate for welcome committee, was going to be in a stray hold status, and was kind of fearful. So could use some additional support from our teams. So if we look at the photo just to the right of Elkie's photo, this is what kennel indications can look like. So these are kennel cards. This is what we use on the front of our kennels to identify all of our animals. And you can see at the bottom in that sleeve there for Elkie's kennel card, there's a welcome committee sign. So that kennel front indication is really important when an animal is a part of welcome committee. For folks that are in the area and around, they're aware of what that is. That might tip them off to increase enrichment, right? Check out Elkie's housing, and then treat drops, just dropping off treats every time you pass by. If you see the bucket, the photo of that bucket sort of far right on the screen here, this is something we commonly use for our welcome committee dogs. Is we'll just affix a bucket full of non-perishable treats to the front of their kennel, and with a little bit of signage about, just give me extra treats, or I'm shy, please trust treats, something simple like that, or even just the bucket of treats can get folks every time they're passing by dropping off a treat for that dog, which is it's going to support them again right through coping with the shelter environment and the fear that they're experiencing. If we look at this bottom left photo at the bottom here, this is a picture of what status and sub-statuses can look like in a shelter database. Again, we use Shelter Buddy. So you can see that stray hold is that primary status. So this animal is being held anyway at the shelter. But in those sub-statuses, you can see that we have welcome committee tagged there as an indication for folks using our database that this is a welcome committee animal. And if we look to the bottom right here on the screen, we can see some notes that were in Elkie's record. So these are notes from our animal care team. And these are notes about welcome committee type work that was happening, again, during that stray hold period with the folks that were already going to be providing care to this dog. And were equipped through the launch of this welcome committee program, right, to better identify dogs that maybe need a little bit of extra support, get them that support right away, and start affecting behavior change so that we can just move that animal through the shelter as quickly as possible. So for Elkie, after she became our property and had sort of sat through that stray hold, and just looking at her record, everything we needed was already there in terms of behavior change in order to support just pathwaying her straight to an available for adoption status. So for Elkie, we were able to make her available for adoption right away without holding her up for a behavior assessment, just based on the information shared in her record. And she was adopted very quickly after that. So hoping this story and some examples of what some of these welcome committee pieces can look like in a kennel, in a shelter database, just helps you really visualize this stuff and inspires you to think about what welcome committee could look like in your facility. And I'm going to pass it off to Fernando to take us a little deeper on welcome committee in action.
Thank you, Shannon. I do love those ears. Okay, has adorable little perky ears there. So you've heard Shannon and Amanda talk a lot about the collaborative effort that Welcome Committee is, and how different parts of the organization, throughout operations, volunteers are all involved in it. And I know personally, I tend to think of Welcome Committee a lot from the behavior perspective, the behavior plans. And it's easy to forget how much more is involved from that initial introduction into your organization, whether it be a stray or owner relinquish or whatever the intake process is. It needs to be low stress. It needs to be in a way that minimizes that, or at least manages, if not minimizing, that fear, anxiety, and stress. From there, we move into, from the intake process to housing. How do we house this dog? Where do we place this dog? The special needs that this dog may or may not have. And then keeping in mind that a great deal of their time in the shelter is going to be spent in that kennel. So we need to look at additional enrichment. How do we provide for this dog when they do go out of the kennel? What are we providing? What kind of enrichment? What kind of interactions they're having? And then, of course, we move into the actual behavior plans. And many times, with a low stress intake, the enriched housing, additional enrichment, we may not get to that behavior plan. That dog may show a sufficient improvement that we can, sufficient behavioral improvement that we can actually just move them into a placement position. And so looking at this entire process from the beginning to all the way to the end is really important, realizing that this process starts at intake. Amanda, next slide, please. So speaking of intake, when we're looking at the fear, the anxiety, the stress that this is experiencing, it's a different environment. It's whether it be a owner relinquish or a stray or whatever, they are experiencing some stress. But there are things we can do to minimize that stress by preparing the environment, being aware of smells and noise. If we just did a room clean, maybe there's another room we could bring this dog into while that odor kind of dissipates. Things like non-slip surfaces. If you don't have anything fancy, just laying a towel on a scale, making it a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful, a little more stable for that dog who's getting weighed. Going slow, giving yourself time to act, giving yourself and that dog time to acclimate. Rushing through that process while we all know that time is a resource in sheltering, and we have other animals coming through. In the long term, giving that animal a little bit more time actually creates more time for your other processes and allows that dog to perhaps spend less time in the shelter itself. And we're all in sheltering, and it can be very stressful, and we know that we have camaraderie, and we laugh, and we try to have fun. But when we're dealing with these dogs coming to the shelter, particularly the more stressed ones, the ones experiencing higher FAS, lowering our voices, maybe playing some nice soft music in the background can help to reduce that stress overall and make that transition a little bit easier for that dog coming into the shelter. And if you're able to, learning a little bit about low stress handling, creating less invasive pattern or methods for getting those vaccines in. Sometimes it can be just as simple as taking a bit of wet food, putting it in a tray, and while that dog is eating, administering the vaccine. Or using that food to lure him or her onto a scale. These are things that we can do to ease that stress, ease that initial introduction into the shelter. And while we're doing all this, it's important that we're constantly monitoring that stress, because FAS is not a one and done deal. It's a snapshot, and that dog may experience an FAS of 2 when walking through the door, and that can go a 1 or go up, depending on how they experience that initial intake into the shelter. Next slide, please. And so once you've done that intake process, you've got the vaccines, the weight, and everything else you need to do, however your particular organization works, moving to a kennel is really important. And while we do like to have the idea of having that double-sided kennel, with a section for elimination and a section for rest and play and eating, that's not always possible. And so looking at these pictures here, the top 2 pictures, those are both San Diego Humane Society photos. Those are San Diego Humane Society kennels, especially in this day and age where I think everyone across the board is kind of experiencing these higher numbers of animals coming into the shelter, longer length of stay. It's hard to get them out sometimes. We're not always able to provide that ideal environment, but we can make adjustments. And so that picture on the left shows a built-up kennel, but it has tarps around it, kind of reducing the visual stimulation. if we can do things to reduce the auditory stimulation, sometimes putting in buffers. Sometimes we're limited, but creating as much as we can so that these animals experience less stress, particularly the ones that we're looking at for things like Welcome Committee, where they're already at a higher level of stress. Their FAS is already heightened. And so if we can minimize that while still providing their needs, we still have a place to eat there, a place to rest. We're just reducing these auditory and visual stimulation, so we reduce that overall stress. And Shannon kind of talk a little bit about the buckets and signage, and that's a great thing to do. And I think it's important to have that so that people can walk by and do the treat drops, who can read the signs and recognize, okay, this dog needs a little more help, this dog needs a little bit more assistance, or maybe a slower process. It's also important to train the staff so that they know these things are there, they know what they mean. If the signage is there, but the staff is not trained to stop and look at the signage, they may go right through. If no one's there to refill those buckets, there's no treats for the dogs. And so making sure that we have that training in place, and it could be something very simple, just brief communication of these dogs are here, they have these needs, we need to look for the signs. Allowing the staff and volunteer to go slow when that dog needs a little bit more of a special interaction. Amanda? And one of the things that we do, and I love it. I'm pretty new to the organization, but I do love to hear about this, is these project parties. And so we have new volunteers coming in, they're getting to know the organization, they're getting to know each other, they're getting to know staff and the way processes are run in this organization. And they're doing it while they're making goodies for the dogs. They're making snacks, they're having these fun social interactions. And it's a great way not only to provide for the dogs, but to provide an introduction into the organization for those volunteers. They're being able to create snacks, trays, different types of snacks that the behavior staff, the Welcome Committee volunteers, people from the animal care, whatever department you're in, they're able to provide that. And that makes it a little bit easier when we're all rushing around trying to clean kennels, trying to move dogs around, trying to do our everyday operations processes. And we have these enrichment items readily available, which help to make that, again, that kennel space, which is where they spend so much of their time, particularly I would imagine dogs that would be in Welcome Committee where they're a little bit more stressed and they maybe are not as easy to get out, or maybe require a little more time to get out. We can provide a little more enrichment within that kennel, so that they are experiencing a less stressful interaction. Next slide. And enrichment yards. I do love enrichment yards. Speaking of getting dogs out of kennels, I often see a lot of high arousal, running around, throwing fetch, which is great. And also for these dogs, it's helpful to have calm, more relaxed, more slow interactions, low pressure. These kind of interactions are good for fearful dogs, like dogs experiencing anxiety, dogs who have a little more energy, a little more high arousal. It's a de-stressor. It engages their senses. Treats rolled up in a towel, put in a bucket or in a box. I've seen shelters bring in like old pizza boxes, things that the dogs can interact with, smell, engage, use their senses, process, and that's calming behaviors that they're getting to practice rather than the more high energy behaviors, creating more of athletic dogs. Things like pools, a little bit of water on a hot day is fantastic. We can get things donated sometimes if we can't, if we don't have the resources to get it outright, but being able to provide these low energy, calm interactions in the yard rather than all the high energy stuff. And it's great for the people. People get to watch this, they get to interact with the dogs, they get to see the dog in a more calm state. And so we have different types of enrichments that we can create. I mentioned boxes, paper bags with treats in them, towels, treats rolled in them. Someone in the chat mentioned Boy Scout groups, having Boy Scout groups that come through and create the PVC pipe feeder items. These are pretty easy to put together. They just take a little bit of time. They're easy to sanitize. They're stuff that can go in the wash and then come right back out and reuse again for those dogs. Snuffle mats, same thing. Engaging those senses, the sense of smell, really interacting with their environment, and rather than doing high energy, high arousal behaviors, they get to practice those calm behaviors, which not only reduce stress, fear, anxiety, but help them to show better. I mean, what's cuter than walking by a kennel with a dog nose deep in a snuffle mat? That's about getting them out the door, getting them into those homes. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, you do want to talk to your medical team. You do want to make sure that whatever enrichment items you're using, they're deemed safe for your population or for the individuals. We don't want any blockages or anyone getting injured as we go through these processes, but we do like to provide them with ways that they can interact and use their senses. I think Shannon was talking the other day about using animal sense in some of the enrichment items. A lot of these things you can get cheap, free, donated, and they are incredible enrichment items for these dogs. And I think this is Amanda's. Back to Amanda.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the behavior plans section of our program for the Welcome Committee. But before I show what our flow chart looks like and what behavior plans are incorporated into this program, I do just want to take a couple minutes just to talk about the limitations of behavior modification in the shelter. And so while we have a large behavior and training team, we have a beautiful purpose-built behavior center facility. Behavior modification programs in a shelter, they have their limitations. There are time constraints. We're not immune to any of these limitations as well. These are challenges that we've had to work through and find ways to be the most impactful and effective when we are doing specialized behavior modification. And that's why, again, programs like the Welcome Committee are so important, because they're built on a foundation of environmental management, enrichment, and getting everybody involved to help with those positive experiences and transitions for dogs into the shelter. But some of these limitations, time constraints, right? I started saying that shelters often experiencing high turnover rates, and that limits time and available to work with each animal through a behavior modification plan. We have resource limitations, whether or not that's space, appropriate space to be able to do this, types of kennels, materials, right? The treats, treat bags, leashes, whatever, would be involved, staffing to be able to do this, and the knowledge associated with being able to implement the plans. There's also animals respond differently to behavior intervention, and some may require more intensive work and specialized intervention with qualified professionals. And so that's why even ourselves, we've developed this triage kind of system where our behavior and training team will focus on the ones that do need the specialized intervention, but we are supporting every other animal through the work that our admissions, animal care, and other animal services teams do, and our volunteers. The shelter environment is stressful. I can't stress that enough. And that is, again, the inspiration for trying to create the system and program is so that we can try to limit that stress as much as possible. But stress is going to impede the progress of behavior modification efforts. It's not the same as working with an animal in their home with their owner, where there is more sense of comfort and comfortability, right, with that environment. There's going to be variability in volunteer staff training, which can lead to inconsistencies in the techniques used, potentially confusing animals. And then there's no guarantee of success with behavior modification, and some behaviors may not be safe to work within a shelter setting or to place in an adopted home. And so I'm sharing this not to dissuade anybody from creating a behavior modification program in their shelter, but just wanting to acknowledge what those challenges are, because behavior modification doesn't come without those. And so those are things that we really want to consider in how we're utilizing our resources. And, for us, we do put a lot of our resources in those foundational programs and foundational processes that we have, so that for the majority of our animals, we can try to move them, to a foster home, to an adoptive home as quickly as possible. Okay, so with that said, this is an example of, we call it our roadmap for the Welcome Committee dogs. And this flow chart is organized into 4 different sections, which follow kind of a natural progression, or they follow kind of increasing invasiveness as far as what we are going to be doing, how we're interacting with that animal, right? So that first bucket there is the proximity bucket, and that is just a dog being comfortable with being in our space, coming close to us. And these are so great for so many of the individuals who are helping to support this program. A lot of this work can be done in the kennel, can be done outside of the kennel as well, but those are those treat drops that Shannon had mentioned. Treat retreat, I think that's a fantastic protocol to implement within the shelter environment. It actually is a really great training tool to help staff and volunteers really identify different body language cues. So I love this as a way to build, confidence within the dog, but also folks to recognize, when a dog is actually saying, nope, this is the limit or the space, that I feel safe in, and this is the distance I want to stay away from you. And then we have treat trails as well. And so again, these plans are gradually increasing in invasiveness from getting used to us being around them, moving on to then doing more handling. So we're doing some hand feeding then, collaring, putting collars, harness, clipping the leash, and then we call that last bucket containment and transport, which is getting them used to a crate and or actual walking on a leash. And with some of the more advanced cases that we have worked with, that is really important. Some of the dogs, they don't have that experience having a collar on, a harness on, or walking on leash. So all of these plans utilize positive reinforcement, and they are focused on building relationships and confidence. And through the educational program, we have included 10 written plans, which you'll get access to what those plans are. And we have trained our staff on those plans. And so just a couple more slides here, and then we'll open it up for questions if anybody has any. So our educational program, we've mentioned this a few times, we will be having a separate webinar on April 10th to go through that educational program and how we developed it, and where we thought it would fit, who would be involved, and what communication tools and tools for assessing its effectiveness we used. And so just generally speaking, this just gives you an outline of what the actual modules and the course look like. So you can see it is a lot of content. There were 20 required modules covering a range of topics from identifying fear, anxiety, and stress, being able to communicate objectively about behavior and provide that information back, to more advanced training on how to actually implement and practice the techniques with the behavior plans. We use chunked learning, which is a great way, especially in a shelter environment where the modules are set up to be about 10 to 20 minutes. If they are longer on that sheet, they were split up into multiple different modules, because we know that time is a commodity, right? Like it is so important. And how we use our time in a shelter is so important because we're so busy. And so we wanted to be able to fit this training in throughout the day, and try to make it as easy as possible for the staff and volunteers going through it. There were assessment components, gauging learner understanding, but also their skills as well. So we'll talk more in detail about, what those look like, but it was as simple as a quiz, to maybe a short written assignment, to a video assessment where they sent in a video implementing one of the plans, and then we had graders. Actually, Shelter Playgroup Alliance, we're so grateful for them for helping us with hosting the training for us. Their volunteer graders were fantastic, and they helped us with this assessment component. And then there were optional modules for those individuals who wanted to help with dog-to-dog interactions, for co-housing and play pairs as well. And so resources and support. We have set up a portal and a resource page for everyone. So if you visit sdhumane.org/welcome committee, it'll take you to an email wall where you'll put in your information, your organization information, and you can set up a login for our welcome committee resource page. And on there, you'll be able to find our protocols, so the actual SOP that we have, and then all of the different behavior plans. There are instruction sheets for enrichment, instruction sheets for the project party. So it's a host guide. You'll also be able to view the toolkit from that page as well, which has a lot of information for you to consider, and team activities for you and your volunteers and staff. There's a readiness scale to go through. There are examples of monitor sheets, guidelines for objective information gathering, and then other team activities. And then if you do have any additional questions, or think of something after this webinar, feel free to reach out to us at Behavior Center Academy at sdhumane.org. So Fernando does monitor that. That's our group email, and we'll be able to provide you with some support after as well. All right. So any questions? We have, looks like 5 minutes for questions. So feel free to, throw them in the chat.
There is a question in the chat that reads, are FAS scores of 4 and 5 dogs that have these FAS scores a lost cause? I can answer that. I'm sure Fernando and Amanda will have stuff to add, but no, I would say no, these animals are not a lost cause. Again, to thinking about like information gathering and FAS scores too, it almost always sort of like hinges on the details here. You know what I mean? When I hear something like that, I just think about, oh gosh, there's just like so much more information that we need about that animal if we are observing, right, that at certain points in time or under certain circumstances or certain contexts, we're seeing a higher FAS score of 4 or 5. So no, they are not lost causes, and they aren't candidates. We decided, right, for our organization, excuse me, that these dogs with these higher FAS scores are of 4 or 5 are not candidates for welcome committee, but they still get support. They just get support from a different group of people. So they're getting support from our behavior and training team. So we're using different statuses and indications in a separate protocol internally for us to get these animals support just from a different team. Whereas for welcome committee, given the involvement of a large group of people, right, we're having those folks focus on animals that we might be able to move a little bit quicker from the shelter if they get support right away, whose FAS scores are just a little bit lower. Fernando and Amanda, I'm sure there's something you want to add to that.
I would just remind everyone that FAS scores, they're great, they're useful. They're something that once you learn it, it's a great way to communicate quickly, but it's also a snapshot. It's a moment in that dog's life. And so, yes, that dog may be experiencing an FAS 4 or 5 at intake or somewhere in that process. They may be a lower FAS score and go up to FAS 4 or 5, or whatever direction. However, it's a snapshot and we treat it as such.
Yeah, and to that point, we have also experienced where maybe on intake, that dog was experiencing a 4 or 5, and we were seeing more of those defensive behaviors, or some of they might be aggression-based behaviors, right? Lunging, snapping, trying to bite, maybe biting. It still triggers, though, that we need to information gather, and we have had cases where, the next day, once they've had that opportunity to be in a kennel, which we've enriched for them, our animal services leadership might go through and say, you know what, they're much lower today. They're at a 3, they're at a 2, right? Maybe not all the way down to a 2, but they'd get to a 3, and then we can enroll them. So they're absolutely not a lost cause. And again, you'll be able to, work with your team, assess kind of, where the skills, the knowledge, the processes that you have in place to be able to customize this program and adapt it to your organization.
I can
A couple questions
read
coming
off,
through there.
I can read off questions if that's helpful. Okay, next question is, when you implemented these procedures, how much pushback did you receive from staff and volunteers, and how did you handle it?
Do you want me to take that one, Shannon?
Yes. I figured.
Okay, so surprisingly, not a lot of pushback, actually. And this is how I think about this is the way that I think about implementation too, is that there are a lot of these components that our staff are doing anyways, that they were required to do. And so we're just pulling all those pieces together, and it's how we communicated it with the team. I am also very much a fan of trying to bring all the necessary departments who will have involvement, somebody from them, into the process of developing that implementation plan. And I think that helps to minimize what sort of pushback we get. Some typical pushback would be like, this seems like this is going to, increase, our time, and how much time we have to do our jobs, and we're just trying to get the basics done, and that's what's so nice about so much of the enrichment that we were sharing with you today. Yes, we have more complicated enrichment protocols, play group, buddy walks, canine adventure, dog field trips. Like there's a variety of other tools that we can use, but we focused on, especially in the beginning, those things that were going to be easier to implement, so that everybody could be involved in seeing the progress and the benefit that this brought to the animals, and it makes us feel good. And then to Shannon's point earlier, when she shared about highlighting stories, highlighting the story, of Elkie, that we have to remind ourselves, because we're moving on the go, but that is a great way to be able to build that engagement and minimize the pushback. Shannon, Fernanda, would you add anything?
Yeah, just that I think generally folks were excited about this program and sort of the prospect of like offering support to individuals that were already being sort of like purposing that time where we were already holding these animals in our shelter anyways. I've also found it's been true for me that most folks that are involved in operations in shelters have an interest in behavior. And so that like educational bit I think was enticing. And we haven't talked about that yet. We'll talk more about that on April 10th in our next webinar, but that was also optional. So what was not optional is taking the steps, right, and enrolling dogs into Welcome Committee once we designed that protocol following some of the steps that I and Amanda have mentioned, where folks are invested and involved in that process so that it's sensible, it makes sense, and it's simple, and you're already using systems of communications you have in place in your shelter already. But we didn't require folks to take the educational component. That was optional for folks that were at a certain point. We'll go over again more of this next webinar, but we're at a certain point in their employment in terms of like time and training related to other tasks within their job role for both staff and volunteers. So that educational component, sort of advancing folks' like education around behavior and learning to implement behavior plans, that was optional. That was not required of all of our staff.
Yes, I saw a lot of excitement as I was kind of working with the staff and volunteers and with the people over at Shelter Playgroup Alliance, people who would submit their assignments and get feedback, and they write back to and follow up with emails going, "Oh my God, this is so amazing! I just learned something new," or I had a bunch of individuals who would kind of keep me updated at every step of the way. Like, I got this done. One more step to go. One more class to go. Very, very excited. Very proud of what they did, and all that they learned.
Yeah, it fostered a really like collaborative, fun relationship between our B&T team and other staff members and volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of a related, there's a question about what role does playgroups have in your enrichment? Love love play pairs, love, play groups. It can be an incredibly beneficial form of out of kennel enrichment, and social interactions, right, for animals. We do take care, though, to make sure that every dog that would be involved in play pairs does, they are showing those relaxed behaviors, and engaging in really good play. And that was part of this educational program too, was those folks who wanted to learn some advanced handling skills, being able to help with dog-to-dog interactions, and be able to manage play groups. We provided them that training as well. So that is also an option. And again, depending on what a day could look like, depending on, what time of year maybe, and although it's not really feeling like we're getting much of a break anymore in animal welfare. There's a slight bit of a break as far as the number of dogs in care. It ebbs and flows. I mean, this is truly a part of our spectrum of care and spectrum of enrichment that we can offer. So it definitely has a place. And we have individuals who do help with that. But we also like to focus on some of the other enrichment that we can get to the masses.
Yeah, I would add to that for playgroups and play pairs. We do have an internal SOP. It is something that we do. We tend to focus on smaller groups, 3 or 4, or pairs. And what we're doing, especially considering we have so many animals in the shelter right now, what we're doing a lot of is social housing. So socially housing pairs of dogs together, maybe pairs or 3s. So we're focusing on those smaller groups right now, but also using like social time with other dogs, kind of in it like a dual purpose type way, where we're able to effectively use our space as well too, with the high number of dogs we have in our facilities. And that is an optional part of the educational program that we'll share more about in our upcoming webinar. There's another question about that in the chat as well. That's on April 10th. So our second webinar is going to be dedicated to walking y'all through what the educational component of this program looks like.
And one thing I will add too for the support and resource slide. So I'm actually going to go back to that slide so you can catch the information, on there. So there's the email address that you can use. There's also that the resource page you can access through the website. So we don't have the educational course on that page. In September, we're going to be launching it again for our staff internally to get more staff and volunteers trained. But we will provide updates on this page. And when you sign up for access to this page, we'll collect your email addresses and send out an email. And so if your organization is interested, we'll have some limited spots for that educational program for the Welcome Committee. So it will go through exactly what you saw on that other slide. I'll go back to it. So it's these courses. One thing I will recommend to think about, and we'll have this information, September is a long time away. Lots of things will happen before then. But one thing just to consider is if your organization is interested, having at least 2 people go through it. It's so important that your learners have somebody that they can kind of lean on as a cohort, essentially, to go through the education. They can talk through kind of the assignments. They'll have to submit things separately, but it's really supportive.
Okay.
All right.
Answered.
I think that was it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's it for now. I know we ran a bit over, but
Yeah.
I just want to thank you 3 so much for your time. I know you're busy. I know we're all facing multiple challenges, and I just really value your insights and just offering the knowledge to folks, anywhere across the country. So appreciate you so much. And like we mentioned, we'll have another webinar April 10th. We'll see you then. And in the meantime, if you need to get hold of us, please use their email address, or you can reach out to me and I can always funnel you that way as well. Okay. Thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thanks, y'all.